Welcome to Meet the Candidate, and my guest for this session is Jenny Graham, who is currently serving as 6th Legislative District State Representative and is running for re-election. And Jenny, welcome to the program. And we were talking just beforehand about how you grow up is something that really does shape your perspective on the world, and you have a really interesting story. It's a little different from other people, and so if you could tell us a little bit about how you grew up and what you learned from that.
Well, both my husband and I grew up in Western Washington in the Federal Way, Auburn area. It's kind of interesting when I think about the different candidates that I've seen in the past and the stories that they've talked to about how they grew up, and I weigh that with, you know, my first bed was in a dresser drawer in the projects in Seattle. So that usually kind of raises some eyebrows a little bit. But yeah, it was a tough life, very definitely. Very much domestic violence in our family, and it was on a large scale, to the point where my sister and brother did not survive. They both ended up dying as teenagers, and I think that's definitely really shaped the person, the strong woman that I've become. I know when they've asked the question in the past, if what job would you want to do when you grow up? And for me, that dream was to be a lawyer. Life kind of took a little different path, because I didn't have that, I was trying to survive on a daily basis. So, we don't have the ability to choose which life we are born into, but we absolutely have the ability, once we become adults, to make different choices in our lives. And it was definitely hard. I remember being a young person and working 4 jobs.
4 jobs?
4 jobs.
What were they?
So I worked in a restaurant. I worked for a trucking company. I had my license as a cosmetologist, and I was in the military, enlisted in the military. So the schedule just was kind of adjusted, but I know that when I hear the conversations that we have today about it being so tough with the different, having to have more than one job, when I think about that time in my life, those jobs I was so proud to have, that was freedom. Mm-hmm. That was freedom. That was me being able to take control of my life and to decide where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And it was safety, because now I could take care of myself. I was in my own place, and I couldn't be hurt anymore. So I feel very fortunate and very, very blessed that I can look back at this now, and I can realize that for a while I was like I think anybody would be, just kind of angry. Why, what did I do in my life to deserve this?
Mm-hmm.
Children don't do anything in their life to deserve that. But I also recognize now that being a legislator, and when I look at the issues, the safety issues, domestic violence is off the charts here in Spokane, and I look back at the experiences that I have, that it helps me to understand that really from the ground up. I understand the dynamics of that. I understand what the children go through, what the mothers go through, because there was, there's always the question, well, why didn't the mom just leave? And it's just not that easy. And now that I've become that adult, I am excited about being in this position that I can fight for victims and their families, for balance in our justice system, and also to work for a positive change. We're seeing so much of this happening right now, so much anger, so much rage, and I had that. I absolutely lived that when my sister was murdered, and friends of mine, were murdered by the Green River Killer. There was a point where there were some individuals that did not want to spend the money to try to find the killer. And, a lot of that was centering around that a lot of these kids were street kids, throwaway kids at the time. And I remember just being, they were, when they actually had the sentencing, they were just names on a piece of paper. And there was the rage that I had that they were being treated that way. So when I think about the rage that I see happening right now with the murders of the African American gentleman, and just heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking, these cases. I am looking at a way to be able to try to bridge that gap and try to bring some balance.
So how did you find your way past your rage?
I'll tell you, I remember sitting there in the courtroom, and I remember that room just being so cold, so cold. There were a lot of families in there that were just, they were crying, they were heartbroken. And I remember having Mr. Ridgway in front, not too far away, and I had a full bottle of water that we had, because of course they checked us for weapons. And I remember writing, because I couldn't just sit. I had to do something. I was so upset at the way that the victims, no pictures or anything, just names on a piece of paper. It just seemed so cold. And I wanted there to be some feeling. So I remember struggling with that bottle of water to ping him in the back of the head with it, because I know that I would have gotten them before they got me. And there was this struggle that was going on. Jenny, you can do that and you will absolutely get their attention. And believe it or not, it would not have been to hurt him. It would have just been to want him to make him feel something, because there was no feeling.
And for you to let that rage have an outlet.
Exactly. And I remember thinking, okay, Jenny, you can do this, you'll get their attention, but what is it going to change? And part of it would have been, to do something for my sister and for the other victims that I knew that he'd murdered. But then I thought, no, this is not me. This is not the right way to handle this. And boy, I'm going to tell you what, I never in my wildest dreams had any inkling of running for office. At that point, that was so far off of my radar that honestly, after that point, I just worked. I went through major counseling to deal, I think, with so much hurt between the domestic violence in the family that absolutely contributed to my sister and brother's death. There's zero doubt about that. And just having a lot of questions, what happened? And how do we change this? How do we get to what could I possibly do to try to help other families out there so that they don't end up feeling the same kind of pain that we felt. And eventually I got to a point where I worked to reform child sexual assault statutes of limitations, just as a mom, that it dawned on me, because that was part of the abuse in our family, was sexual abuse. And most kids don't talk about it, and a lot of times it's not till you're an adult. And the way that the statute of limitations were at that point, you, in more likely cases than not, had to report within a year. And it didn't matter what kind of evidence you had to prove that case. And I remember just recognizing, because I was told, look, you have more evidence in your old case than a lot of the new cases that we have, but the statute of limitations is passed. And I thought, a year? It's not hard to keep a child quiet for a year, especially if you threaten their life or the people that they love or their pets. And I just remember thinking that that was not a fair hand in our justice system for children when they became old enough to understand what happened and were denied justice. So I worked to change it successfully. And that's what set me up to run for this seat and to really make some changes and to take that strong stand, because in the Public Safety Committee, I'm definitely in the minority, but I have, I'm very strong and assertive when it comes to taking a look at what is happening on both sides of that issue. Because on one hand, I had my sister and brother that were street kids, and it was heartbreaking to go to King County, look up records, and see that, like, my brother had been arrested for shoplifting. He shoplifted a comb. He wanted, he was a kid. And, to see some of these other records. So I understand, reading a letter from my sister talking about, losing 10 pounds, being out on the street, because obviously eating is hard, and we didn't really have very many programs back then. So on one side of it, I definitely see that, why crime, can happen, and 100% support the programs, 100% back the people that, want to make the changes. And then there's the other side. If they continue to hurt other people, then you have to hold them accountable.
Well, you wrapped up a whole bunch of the questions that I would otherwise normally ask about life experience and what you learned from that, in that really a fascinating piece of conversation there. I'd like to bring you to some that I was the happier side of life, which is, you mentioned you're a mom and your husband, and so just a little bit about your family life, because you have survived and risen above where you started.
Yes.
And so where are you now?
Well, I love my life. I love my life now. I mean, like I said, I would not have been able to be the strong person that I am without those life experiences that helped to shape me. My mom lives with us now, and we have a really good relationship, because I understand what happened with her. Why was it so hard in a domestic violence situation, for her to be able to protect us? She couldn't protect herself. And when I think about the life that we have now, and I think about her doing things that she would have never done before, because of the fact that he had so much control over her. She is doing things, and she has friends, she has a job, she is doing better than she ever has in her life. And I love that our family is, because for about 10 years I couldn't speak to her. I couldn't, because I was trying to protect my kids. I didn't want to have that. She wouldn't leave, and I couldn't have my kids watch that as being normal. So she had to come to that on her own and make her own decisions. And now, we've been able to pick up our life, the stepfather that was abusive, he's passed away. But like I said, we are definitely a success story. And I love that we've been able to change basically the family tree for my kids, that they've had a happy life, they're successful. And, I know that, I've done everything that I could. I was lucky though. I have a wonderful husband. Curtis is an amazing, amazing, amazing man.
Well, on that happier note then, I'd like to go ahead and ask you that last closing question was, now why should voters vote for Jenny Graham for 6th Legislative District State Representative?
They should, well, I'm hoping that first I've earned their trust. I have, I am not kidding when I'm telling you that I'm working 7 days a week. And, there's a lot that's going on right now. But, mainly the things that I would hear when I was going to their doors, when I'm meeting them at their businesses, is they want to be able to live and work and raise their families in peace and safety. And those things are absolutely within our grasp to be able to do. I love being able to connect with the people. It's not my seat. That seat belongs to the people of the 6th District, and I work for them. And because of that, I have oftentimes found myself even going into places that are uncomfortable. As a Republican, I was downtown, the only state rep that went downtown at the Red Wagon to hear the people in the district when there was so much going on. So I feel very grateful to be in a position when I've had so many calls coming in from families that are suffering, that are needing help, that I've been able to be there. And if they continue to give me their trust, I will continue to work for them, and I'm pretty tenacious in the things that I take on.
Okay, and with that closing, Jenny, thank you for coming into the station, and good luck with your campaign season.
Thank you.
90 million Christians are eligible to vote.
40 million didn't.
That's 45% of eligible Christians not voting.
We can change that.
We Believe We Vote was designed to arm people of faith with information on candidates
And how they line up with biblical and constitutional principles.
It's simply WeBelieveWeVote.com.
We're on a mission to rev up the 2020 election.
Tell your friends, your neighbors, and especially your pastors to rev up.
Be an educated voter.
Arm yourself with truth based on the Word of God.
2020, rev up.
Register, educate, vote.
Rev up.
Rev up.
Rev up 2020.